Assalamu alaikum, I'm Yaaseen Barnes, and this is the Muslims Connected podcast, a podcast for those looking for enrichment and to better their lives. Today we are joined by the esteemed Her Excellency, Fatima Chohan. Assalamu alaikum, shukran for joining us today.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you for the privilege.
Shukran for having us in your home also, in a special time during, the fight for Palestine. We're here to share the story, and I feel like you have more to speak also with all the work that you've done. You've been with the South African Human Rights Commission, which is a big title a big position to have in our country, especially in our country, coming from the apartheid. But how do we get there for yourself? Who were the leaders that inspired you growing up to take on the position to serve for the country? Who were your first leaders in your life?
Well, that is a very rich question, if I may say, Yaaseen, because one finds inspiration from so many people that one interacts with from an early age. Of course, I come from a very working class family, but a very religious family. And the one thing that I've learned in that extended family where we all lived in each other's lives was how respect for differences is very important, and that the most important things to cherish in life are not material things, but relationships that you build with one another. That relationships are not always easy, that there are usually conflicts because no two people ever think alike.
Yeah.
And we all have very different opinions, sometimes very strong opinions. But it's how you navigate those in a positive way that really matters, and that really then cements relationships. Very often you can have a really close relationship with somebody who initially you were in deep conflict with, but who you've managed to together plow through your differences. And once you do that, there is a certain mutual respect that gets built up, and those are the best kinds of relationships that endure, and that can withstand a lot of upheavals.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that I've learned from my family members. I remember when there were conflicts in the family, amongst family members, my grandparents, particularly my two grandfathers, would get together and call the family together and talk through these issues and resolve them. Nobody would leave the room until these issues get sorted. And they're sometimes very big issues.
Yeah.
And these are things that you learned from these early role models who in turn learned from their parents. And so it was very it was a real honor, I think, for me to be brought up in this extended family where these values of really treasuring and working on human relationships were taught at a very young age. If you think about young people today, particularly people in our society, many young people firstly don't even grow up with both parents.
Very true.
Let alone an extended family. And they don't have that privilege of learning from, sitting at the dinner table and learning lessons of this nature.
Yeah.
And as they grow up, they find that there are gaps, and they're unable to navigate relationships in a healthy way. So these were some of the early role models. And then, of course, I grew up in a small little town called Roodepoort, where the Indian community at the height of apartheid were kind of bunched together in a in a really weird section of the city, and it was a mining town, and a lot of the people who I grew up with were traders who had come from India, and of course my family were no different. But what was very interesting about that community was that we were very close-knit. Most people knew each other, and most people, their extended families, had come from the same area of India. And so there were long ties going back many generations amongst the people. They're both Hindu and Muslim. And they all spoke Gujarati to each other. The young people all spoke English, and then there was a lot of Zulu or Fanagalo, as we called it, because most of the customers were people who were the miners who had come from all over the place to work on the mines. And amongst this group of people was Dr. Yusuf Dadu, and my parents' contemporary, who was Ahmed Timol. And I remember as a young child, 4 years old, going to his funeral and knowing precisely what had happened to him, that he was tortured, that he was thrown from John Foster Square to his death. And there were people, our neighbors, my own aunt was taken in for questioning. I remember the anxiety of my grandparents when she was taken in for questioning. Mrs. Amina Desai was our immediate neighbor, and she spent many years in prison because Ahmed Timol was boarding at her house. And I remember as a young child playing in her garden, knowing that she was in prison, and I was, in my own mind, trying to help her look after her beloved roses and her beautiful garden. But that was my first lesson in sadness and injustice, which I think stayed with me for a very, very long time indeed. So this was a really very rich community that I grew up in, and as we moved away from this community, I realized that it was very different from other communities. Yeah.
Marcel, you speak about your grandfathers who treated the family like a court, where they would clean things out, they wouldn't hold it back, and justice would be served. So you saw, I'll say, things being, or issues being sorted out within the family from a young age, and then was that essentially became part of, I'll say, your life when you went to law school with Witwatersrand, and then because at the same time you joined the student movement as well.
So the student movement thing started a little earlier. I was in school. My father was a factory worker, and his factory relocated to one of the homelands in Bophuthatswana called Hammanskraal at that time. And he couldn't travel from Roodepoort to Hammanskraal because that's in the north of the country. So we were relocated, my mother, my father, myself and my sister, to Lodium. And my father would commute every day to Hammanskraal from there. And so I had to do my schooling in Lodium, which was, 50 times larger than this little community that I'd come from. It was very daunting, very different, didn't know a soul. And I found the people there to be a lot more diverse in their attitudes and views. And certainly my teachers, particularly in high school, seemed to, a lot of people, today is very hard for you to find somebody who was not part of the struggle.
Yeah.
But there were plenty of those people around. And certainly in the school, at the high school, certainly where I was most conscious of this was very much pro-government at the time, because they considered themselves as part of the system. Certainly the principal and leadership did. And so I was like a fish out of water in that environment, as you can imagine. And in my, I think it was in Standard 8, I don't know what that is, in grade 10.
Yeah.
We had the absolute honor of having a teacher come in place of a teacher who got a bit ill and needed to go for an op and so on, and her name was Dr. Muthal Naidu, who is a renowned playwright and a recipient of a national order recently, about 5 or 7 years ago. And she became our English teacher probably for about 3 months. But what a profound change that was in terms of, firstly, just her academic skills, which was already something to behold, and but also her political views. Not that she stood in class and said anything, but it's in the soft things that you realize that this is my people.
Yes. Also, especially I feel like English teachers, when they teach the literature, they really can say more than what they need to say, and really give, I'll say, children the perspective of the world more than any of the other subjects. I feel like my own English teachers, I'm very grateful for giving me insight into other worlds and to seeing that some things can be viewed as other things, and also especially with like poetry, where you can speak more truth in something that seems more arty. So that I feel like that was your teacher as well.
Absolutely, and I think you've hit it on the head when you say English teachers can open up the world. Not only did I feel that about her, but I suddenly felt like I enjoyed coming to school for the first time and learning things for the first time.
Yes.
And it was when she was summarily fired that my life just ended. My soul just sank.
And was she fired from or was it the time that was done?
Look, it was a very interesting time in our history.
Yeah.
The tricameral parliament was mooted, and the liberation movements at that stage were completely opposed to this white parliament, Indian parliament, and colored parliament, and with Africans being completely left out. Right, so. Dr. Naidu was part of a group of intellectuals who had made their views known in society at the time, and who would actively go and protest. And for that, she was singled out and given very, very abruptly her marching orders. And when that happened, I was absolutely devastated. I can't tell you how devastated I was. And I then realized my own place in the world, as opposed to the powers that be at school and so on. Long story short, this was the beginning of my activism. And I knew that they would not want us as students to discuss politics, but I was absolutely determined, in my own naive way, to have these discussions. And I decided, well, they're not going to allow us to have a political society, so maybe they will agree to a sports society. And if I get elected to be the chairperson of that society, I set the agenda, and it's going to be for students only. and teachers won't be allowed. And it was the beginning of a really turbulent relationship, let's put it that way.
So it was branded as sports, but underground,
correct,
the movement was happening.
But unfortunately, there was no, I mean, my friends liked me and everything, but they were not terribly interested in politics. They didn't come from homes. They didn't have that background or experience that I had. And
so you 15, 16 at the time?
Yeah, 14, 15, yeah.
It's a very young age to be,
too young.
I'll say, that motivated in a society that is against, like openly against you also, and just to take stance.
Yeah. All of which didn't help very much, that I almost got expelled in my matric year. So I was, everything about my matric year was very eventful. And I decided that I am going to do well to spite my teachers for no other reason. There's no better motivation than revenge. And alhamdulillah, I was able to get a good matric pass and was accepted at the law faculty at the University of the Witwatersrand, where when I did attend, it was just the most amazing place, because I suddenly was in the heart of resistance politics of young people. And I learned so much from so many people at that level, students who were ahead of me, people who were in the MSA, people in the Black Student Society, and I would rarely go to class, but would very often never miss a meeting. My first real interaction with the police at that stage happened on campus. Winnie Mandela was scheduled to speak, and a few hours before that they issued a banning order, and she was told, do not come to campus. And of course everybody just ignored this order, and so did Winnie. And the dogs were unleashed on us, and in the process, my first, I call it small arrest, and so on. Very exciting time for me. And yeah, it just from there.
How was your family, your parents, and your sister with you taking this stance? Were they supportive, or what was the relationship with that with you?
I would say it was a difficult relationship, because if I had a child who I had to protect, I would probably respond in the way that they did. My father is an interesting man. And you talk about heroes and role models. My father was nobody special. He was a factory worker, but he and he probably didn't go to school. I've never discussed this with him, but I imagine that he didn't go beyond grade, standard 7 or so. But he always was reading. He would bring the newspaper home every night, and in those days the newspapers are not the kind of stuff we get in newspapers today, very sensational and so on. They were real resource and a source of information, good journalism. Yeah. And so there was a newspaper at our house every single day. He would expose us to music of the world. He would buy music from different countries, and he would listen to it, and we would in the process also learn. He would buy books on travel, and he would live in that broader world than his physical world. And at no stage, when it comes to, somebody said to me as a Muslim woman, how do you get to positions of leadership and so on, as if there's a dichotomy between being a Muslim woman and a position of leadership. And certainly in the culture that I grew up in, women were housewives, essentially, and wouldn't really study beyond school. But my dad never treated me as if I was different, myself and my sister. There's a story that my mum tells when I was born, he went to go and tell his mother, it's a girl. And his mother's response was, I'm sorry, it's not a boy. And he responded and said, no, I am happy it's not a boy. And from a young age, he would take me wherever he went. I recall very vividly in Rudaport there was a clubhouse, where the men on a weekend would be playing bridge, snooker, table tennis, swimming, tennis. All those things were happening there, but only men congregated there. And every weekend, without fail, while we were living in Rudaport, he would take me along with. I learned to swim there. I learned how to play drafts. I learned the rules of snooker by just watching them. At no stage did I feel, no, I don't belong here. And he always, I've never had to go and do kitchen work when I was a teenager. He'd never ask me to leave him alone when he was entertaining visitors or something of that sort. Simply because to him I was his child, not his daughter. I was his child. And what he did for me was to enable me to dream, to be who I really was, and likewise for my sister as well. So in that sense, a real hero, because I have seen how other fathers are with their daughters.
I think of parents of apartheid or in apartheid. The thing apartheid took from them is the ability to dream. So the parents who could give their children also the ability to dream, despite and not passing down the thing of as children they mustn't dream. Those are always parents who push their children outside of the circle to go, there's more out of the world, and I'm going to prepare you for those things. So then you are now at university. You are part of the student movement. And how far do you take that also? Because that's also a space where there's not many like you. You are, I'll say, the one from your community that's only there. How do you make it known that you are there and that you are willing to fight the fight with everybody? Do they accept you as that as well?
My goal has never been to stand out. At that stage, there were no real leadership roles that I was vying for, anything of the sort. I just reveled in this atmosphere. I loved attending meetings. I learned at every meeting. I read as much as I could. My studies were all secondary because, remember, I'm doing law. This is the law of the apartheid government. And I had to understand for myself what it is that I was doing. And unless I was reading Albie Sachs or something of that sort in my coursework, not even my lecturers were very inspiring to me, because these were people practicing apartheid law, you understand. So I understood my role there to be, I need to understand this beast of apartheid from the inside out. What I understood is that it was a set of laws. And for me to be able to contribute to the struggle, I needed to use these laws for the benefit of my people. So in my mind, I am just going to qualify as a lawyer and then assist all these people who are going to prison for the struggle and be their defense. I mean, that's what I've got in my mind. And so university was just this amazing thing. Then one thing happened at university. One of the people who I was studying law with in my second or third year, his name was Shadrach. They were planning to leave the country illegally and go and receive training. And, you know, in those days, you never know who to trust and who not to trust because...
spies
exactly.
And holes and...
The ANC was very much underground. It was a banned organization. Saying its name was problematic in the wrong circles.
Yeah.
And you knew that on campus there were people who were infiltrators. Wow. And this chap comes to me and says, he doesn't say anything, and we had not had a close relationship. But he came to me and he said, we are meeting at this point at 8 o'clock in the evening, and you need to be ready. So I said, ready for what? And he said, you know what? And I had this second sense that this is what he's talking about. Yeah. But I also felt that we were not close enough for him to kind of want to take me along with.
Yeah.
And I agonized over this thing because it for me, there were those roads, you know. I had this general idea of what I was going to be, but I also knew that the real champions of our struggle were outside.
Yeah.
And I didn't close myself up to those possibilities. The only thing that would have held me back was that my parents would be worried about me. And I didn't turn up on that day. And for a long time thereafter, I felt very two-minded about this situation. But I never saw Shadrach again. Now, whether he had, and I mean even after 1990, after the unbanning, I never saw the man.
What was where did they go from, I'll say the group that met, where did they go from there?
Information was not shared very freely, but I imagine that very often the route was Swaziland, and from Swaziland out to Maputo, and then from Maputo up north, either Tanzania, Zambia, or wherever. So those things were not known to me fully at that stage, because I was never part of MK, and this was more of that kind of invitation, you know, do you want to go and train outside? So at university there were these kind of meanderings, I would call them. And then I went, after I qualified, my parents had then moved back to the extended family who had all by that time moved to Azadville. And this was around the time that the ANC was unbanned. I'd finished my studies. And so I'm going now back home, but it's not Lodium anymore. It's Azadville, which is a new place for me altogether, because I was living on campus or near campus. And when I got to Azadville, this was a very strange thing to me, because now it's a new place.
New rules.
It's the same community from Rudderpoort, only just larger and new place. And I'd not really grown up with these people, so I didn't know many people, etc. And the one day, not long after moving back, I got my articles in Pretoria, so I was traveling with my dad from Azadville that way, and doing my articles there. And one weekend I went to the shops and I saw a little notice that there was going to be an ANC meeting, and they wanted to establish a branch. The ANC had just been unbanned, and people had come back from exile. And Isi Dinath and his wife, Ramni Naidu, from the famous Naidu family, settled in Azadville. And I attended this meeting, and it was just a few people, not a lot of people. As I said, it was very hard to find people who were part of the struggle in those days, even, after the unbanning.
Yeah.
And I was so privileged to know them. They had been in exile for many, many years and had come back, and they were just the most amazing people to meet. There was also Matimal's brother, and Muhammad was his name, and one or two other people who come from, strong struggle families. And this was the essence of the branch. And then I quickly moved up in the ranks of the ANC from that point on. But I never took positions beyond the region.
Yeah.
So in the West Rand, I was part of the regional committee. I became the secretary of my branch and that kind of thing. But remembering, of course, that I was a newly qualified lawyer, the ANC needed my services very early on. Yeah. So what I was deployed at initially was, so I was part of the ANC structurally, but I was also part of the Transvaal Indian Congress, which still existed at that time. And so when the negotiations at Kempton Park happened, the Transvaal Indian Congress nominated me to be an alternate member because they needed 2 males and 2 females. Oh, I can't remember as to, I think it was 1. So they will give, it was 1 because the Transvaal Indian Congress had 1 and the Natal Indian Congress had the other one. So Fatima Hajaj was the female candidate who had gone, or representative at the CODESA talks. And then she fell ill, and as her alternate, I was given the opportunity to be present at those talks. Can you imagine?
Wow.
What a privilege that was for me. And it was a bit difficult because, these meetings continue day after day after day after day, and certain things were on the agenda continuously. And so when you come in as an alternate, you kind of saddled with all these discussions that had already happened. And so you're not really making a contribution, and especially because, she came back and then I had to leave, and so it was very disjunctive. But just to be in the same room with somebody like Praveen Gordon and Baleka Mbete, who were chairing these sessions, I remember making a small little insignificant input, and Dean Smuts, who was next to me, turned to me and said, "Oh, that was very well done." And I was like walking on cloud 9 for like the rest of the day kind of thing, So that was a wonderful opportunity. I met so many of our leaders at that, in that interaction and so on.
But also those were talks that essentially shaped our country.
Absolutely.
So you were, I'll say, in one of the cogs that made the land that we have now.
I didn't make too much of an input, I must be honest. But to be part of that was just such an honor at such a young age. Most of the people there were just, steeped in politics, understood, and were part of the negotiation process from the start, etc. And these were people, I always say, these are people who were constantly going to meet Madiba and taking the, instructions from him and so on. And I was meeting these people. It was just amazing. And then what really changed the trajectory of my career was that we were having, people don't realize we had a national CODESA, and our local government elections are still staggered from our national elections, right? So every local government had to have a mini CODESA because there had to be a transition from an elected representative, or representative council, which is essentially white, to one that incorporated everybody, right? So every local government had to have a little negotiating forum between the statutory side and the non-statutory side. And this was done under a particular legislation that spoke to transitions at the local government level. So the ANC in Gauteng deployed me to go to different parts of Transvaal at that stage, to go and speak to our comrades in the non-statutory side and train them about this new law and how it was going to be implemented and how they needed to participate to a transitional local government, and then the transitional local government will then be ready to go to full elections, so that everybody and all parties could participate in this new. So there was this transitional phase.
So you're in a position where you're leading people now.
Yeah.
But I feel like as a people, we stand on our own, and you stand for yourself. But at the same time, we fill in blocks of as a Muslim, as a woman, as a youth, also at the time. How do those things affect you going forward as a leader now? Like, do you consider the people that you represent, or are you more part of the change must happen as the group?
That's an interesting question. I don't think, my philosophy has always been to do well with what is in front of me. And I guess that comes from some of the values that we learn as Muslim children as well, is, what Allah puts in your path, you need to attend to. And for me, that's always been the myopic view, is I fight my corner and Allah will take care of the rest. So when I started doing that, I started meeting people across the province. And people were calling me constantly for advice, because remember, these negotiations are quite tough in some instances. We're dealing with, I remember in the West Rand, we were negotiating on the statutory side with the National Party, with the Conservative Party, and the Avia Beer.
I only laugh out of the Avia Beer was, they got violent. They got violent during the CODESA situations. Wow.
But you know what was the issue with them is they hated the Nats.
So
they were opposed to the Nats, and they said, we never stood for elections before, so we want to join the non-statutory group.
The enemy of my enemy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they wanted to be part of the ANC's, caucuses.
Yeah.
So there was the ANC, there was the PAC, essentially a ZAPO, and the Avia Beer wanted to be part of this caucus. And these guys are going, whoa, we can't be doing this, So it was very interesting. We had to go and sit with those comrades and say, but, maybe it's not such a bad thing. And actually, they got on very well with the Avia Beer representatives. And we were able to push those talks forward, and they came to an agreement, which then led to a democratic election there. So I became quite well known in the province, is the point. And when it got time for nominations to Parliament, my name was considered, because the ANC had a very strong, and still has a very strong, principle that it works on, and that is there must be, a good representation of women, and diversity. Now it's gone to 50-50, but in those days it wasn't exactly 50-50, but they obviously needed names of women, and my name was then considered. Not because, I'd done anything earth-shattering, but that people got to know me. And when the election happened in 1994, I was too far down the list to make it to Parliament. And I got married at that stage, and my husband moved to Plettenberg Bay, and I thought, okay, well, I've done my bit now. The country is going to move on autopilot, and I can go and have a small practice in some town in the Southern Cape. At the time, I was offered the position of a deputy head of legal services of the Johannesburg Metropolitan Transitional Council. So what was this? This was 7 municipalities coming together to form this. We didn't have metros before that, right? 7 municipalities coming to form a metro, and it was during that transitional phase. They were one of the last municipalities to finalize a transitional agreement. So they called themselves a Transitional Metropolitan Council. And I was given a year contract to work and assist them legally and so on, which was just amazing. I mean, they had so many skilled people in their legal department, all of them white, but people with 2 or 3 doctorates, and and here I am with an undergrad degree, and I just finished my articles and so on, and it was fascinating.
What's the motivation to step up? Because that's also something I feel like as a leader, but just also as a person, where you have to put your own insecurities aside, your own the shakiness in your heart to go, I must just do this. What's that driving force?
I don't think there was. I think it's just taqwa. To be honest, I am a very firm believer that each of us are where we are supposed to be by Allah's design. I've always had that taqwa in me from a very young age. So much so that I remember saying to my family when I was still about 7, 8 years old, that I'm going to be president one day. And people would make fun of me, but I had this conviction, which is irrational, and you understand why they laughed at you, because here we were in apartheid South Africa. It had lasted at that stage already, 50 years. I don't know. They had all grown up in it. And there was no end in sight. All of the leaders were in jail or were being killed, and it was just becoming a more and more violent society. In the 70s, I was 4 or 5 years old at that stage, but it was a police state. It became really violent under John Foster. And so for me to start saying I'm going to be the Prime Minister, it was not President, I was going to be the Prime Minister, because that's what we had. Because I was always listening to the news. I always understood what was happening. And when I said to my family I'm going to be Prime Minister, I believed it. I believed it because for no other reason than I felt it, that there was going to be a change and I was going to be part of that change. And so when these things come your way and you are told, okay, you've gotten married, your husband's gone to Plettenberg Bay, but can you do this for a year? I go, yes. There's never a doubt in my mind that came from somewhere. And even if you feel that you're not up to the task, you always say yes. Because you only learn. You can only learn.
If you're learning, then you're not losing.
Absolutely.
And also, if you go in with the right intention into paths, you can only get better, and the mission will also get better just by you being, committed to it as well.
Yeah. And the thing is, we don't get asked ourselves.
Mm.
The ANC asked me to take up this position.
And also the ANC is a big deal when they offer you something.
You don't
also.
say no.
Yeah.
You don't say no. And that has been my principle throughout life. When I was in Parliament and I was asked to be the chairperson of the basic education portfolio, I was like gobsmacked. I'm thinking, what do I know about education? I'm a lawyer, for heaven's sakes. But I went there and I learned. I learned so much, and I'm so grateful for that experience. And that's really what it is other people saying to you, no, we think you're going to do okay here, you go and do this.
So surrounding yourself with people who believe in you will give you extra drive within yourself. So we now move on to my words are failing me now. The Home Affairs.
Yeah.
which is a big deal, I think, in our country to manage. You're essentially managing the country. Can I say Home Affairs does everything there?
From birth to death, right?
Birth to death. and after death also.
And
it's also the full circle of life you're managing as a country you're managing.
So Home Affairs came much later. I became a member of Parliament in 1996. And I naturally gravitated to the Justice Portfolio Committee, which is something I went on to chair after about 5 years, and then went on to do basic education as a chairperson, and then also public enterprises for a year each, basically. And then in 20...
So, Mark, all of these positions are all... It's different spaces you're going into. How do you climatize? Do you climatize, or do you just get into the job and go, we work? Like, how much learning must you do when you get into these spaces?
Yeah, quite a lot of learning. With the justice portfolio, it was easier. But I learned so much from the people who were there, who were much more experienced lawyers than I was. We did some amazing, we were the hardest working committee because, remember, apartheid was about laws and we had to change all those laws, right? Wow. In addition to which, we set up things like the Public Protector, the Human Rights Commission and so on. So we had to do those laws for these institutions. And of course,
such a big, I'll say, a role to take on for a whole country, to find balance and not one side, the law at the same time. You need to find place for everybody under the sun, at least.
Yeah, no, it was a phenomenal experience to be working with some of the most senior lawyers in our country and in our struggle history. It was a real privilege, and again, as a young person, just learning most of the time. Until I then chaired that portfolio committee, which was, what an honor. And in fact, I was just thinking the other day that with these judges who were being removed from office, that was one of the last pieces of legislation that I passed as the chairperson of the Justice Committee, with huge opposition from the judges themselves. Yes. They absolutely refused at one stage for those pieces of legislation to go through. Thank goodness they did, because now they are using it and they see the worth of this stuff. So, phenomenal honor for me. And then went on to basic education, which, as I said, I knew nothing about. But alhamdulillah, I think it was again something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided me towards, because for the first 6 months I decided I'll just call public hearings and let South Africans come and tell me, experts come and tell us how they think our education system should be redefined. And that's what we did for 6 months. We got something like 300 people coming to the committee talking to us about where we need to take our education system for the next, at that stage we were all at the 2001 kind of millennium discussions.
Is that OBE?
No, actually it isn't. Completely something different. Oh. Unfortunately, it hasn't really been realized because, for many things. What we came up with as the recommendation was we were the first committee to realize that most students who start off in grade 1 don't finish their matric. They drop out in the system. And why were they dropping out in the system is because we still have essentially what the British brought to us, an institution of education that is essentially defined by a classroom, teacher at the helm, and you're sitting and listening and writing and reading, which is fine for about, maybe if we're lucky, 33% of the classroom. I know if you ever had a classroom, I did. When I was in grade 1, we were grouped into A group, B group, C group, and D group. I don't know if that still happens in schools.
It happened with me at least, yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it that kids are at that stage? Everybody is just getting into school at this point. What makes you so different if you're an A group versus a D group child? And the difference is one that really defines the state of the human creature. We as human beings one of the big things that sets us apart in all of creation is that we can learn. But just as we are all different, we all learn differently. And so that little box of a classroom, a desk, a little pen and a book suits 33.5% of us. And that's how we learn optimally. But for the rest, people learn in different ways. And so that environment of learning does not suit optimally their ability to learn. The Nordic countries are realizing this, and they have some of the best education systems in the world. And they basically teach children what children are interested in, and they don't have set syllabus and so on. So what they do is the environment is not even a classroom. Very often they're taking kids out, and kids are learning through tactile learning, through all kinds of other learning, So what we proposed for South Africa was that what we call the three-streamed education system. What is the three-streamed education system? The first is an academic stream, which will take you to university, and you can become a lecturer, or you can become a professor, you can perhaps, write books. If that's your ambition, then you do the academic stream. The next stream would be your governance and administration stream. So people who want to become lawyers, they would do the stream, right? Then you have what we call the vocational stream. And your vocational stream is essentially people who would want to, at high school already, work with their hands. Develop skills that are related to what is needed in the marketplace. So if the economy needs, let's say, engineers, boiler makers, then this is what the stream is going to produce so that after school you walk into a job and not go to college or university. Essentially the first formative years, your primary school remains the same because it's reading, counting, that kind of thing. But when you get to high school, you do academic subjects, all of you, but not to the degree that your academic stream would do it.
So will the break it up into what's needed for you?
So you would probably do advanced engineering stuff in your vocational stream that your academics people won't do.
Yeah, they don't need it.
They don't need it. Technical drawing, for example.
So you had to learn a whole new system, I'll say a whole new job and a whole new system of how to implement an educational system, which essentially changes the country as the community of the country, because people learn better, they become better for the future of the country as well. So we go from education to the next.
Public enterprises, which was another roller coaster, as you can imagine. So public enterprise is a very weird department. It's not a service department like education runs the schools, right? This is the state's shareholding in big companies. So what people don't realize is that people know about ESCOM, people know about SAA, but there are many, many companies that the state has shares in, or that was initiated by the state. And sometimes we just have a controlling share, sometimes we just have shares and so on. So we are, as government, you are a shareholder and you have to protect your interests, but also you have to align some of those interests strategically. So one of the things that I used to get quite annoyed about was SAA. SAA, we have a very love-hate relationship as South Africans with SAA, right? And my view, which was not always Treasury's view, my view was that SAA is a strategic asset. We should not require a strategic asset to necessarily turn a profit. I'm not saying it mustn't be efficient. It mustn't do its job well. But its business isn't about just flying people. Its business is what spin-offs we get as a result of it doing its job. So tourism, for example, nobody will come to South Africa because we geospatially, we are deep south. What is around us?
It's
nothing. It's far. So nobody's going to come and do us a favor and have flights from Europe to South Africa for the Europeans. Or from China, for that matter. It's a huge market. We haven't really tapped in on, really. India, another big market for tourism that we haven't begun to explore properly as a country. We do a lot of Germans. We do a lot of British and maybe some Americans. But, rest of Africa is there for the taking. And so what if we fly to destinations that don't turn a profit? Because the spin-offs in bringing those people here far outweighs the benefit to the country.
It's an investment plan, essentially.
Exactly.
Like someone has to start the movement, and you have to open
and you
access
build
as well.
those markets, you see, because everybody in South Africa likes to go to Mauritius for their honeymoon. Why? Because other people have done it, and it becomes an institution. And that's what we need to do with South Africa. We have to build those markets. It's not going to just be, people are waiting to come to South Africa, and we just have to go and airlift them. No, it has to be a whole plan. So SA is a vital cog in that plan. But if you only going to fly to destinations that are going to turn a profit now,
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
It's a short-term plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my disagreement with Treasury.
So that's enterprise,
Public enterprise.
public enterprise, MAF. And then
Home affairs.
home affairs is the big one. It's
the big one, yeah.
Then where do you start with home affairs? Because also it's home affairs is every South African. I feel like all the other spaces, it deals with a big part of the country, but home affairs is every South African that has the passport. How do you?
I was very lucky. Again, I say Alhamdulillah, because I had my minister had been there before I came. So she was there a year before I was deployed to be the deputy minister. There's this first of President Zuma's big shuffle around, right? And I was made deputy minister, and Minister Dlamini Zuma was the minister. And I know people have many different views about Minister Dlamini Zuma, even since she's run for president of the ANC and so on. But the one thing about her is that she is extremely talented as an administrator. She has got a very solid work ethic, and she likes to take her team with her. She is a team player. With those three things, you can move mountains as a leader. And I learned a lot of leadership skills from her. You know, there are ministers who come into office and their director general has to make an appointment to go and see the minister if there's something urgent. And very often, minister doesn't have time for that. With Minister Dlamini Zuma, she would have a meeting of the senior managers every 2 weeks. And we would sit sometimes from 9 o'clock in the morning to past midnight, depending on how big that agenda was. Wow. Every senior manager in Home Affairs, and Home Affairs is one of the biggest departments, you can, as I said to you earlier, it's 10,000 staff strong. Wow. So all of your chief directors upwards, your chief directors, your deputy director general, and your director general, all of them would be around the table, around 30 of us. And we would have open access to Minister Dlamini Zuma. She would never rush us. Every single senior manager, if he has or she has a problem, she could bring it to the minister, and the minister understood her role. Her role was to articulate a vision. These people are the professionals. They are your technicians. Their job is to realize your vision. But they can only do so if they understand thoroughly, in minute detail, what your vision is. And that is something that nobody else can give them.
Yeah.
They are, highly intelligent, highly professional, highly skilled people. But without a vision, they are completely unable to move. And her vision was to digitize Home Affairs. And we started with the Smart ID card, which was a very difficult thing to do.
Can only imagine.
Home Affairs used to operate warehouses that were as big as rugby stadiums. Not one, but many around the country. Because you can imagine we were a paper-based system. If you went to Home Affairs to register the birth of a child, you would be given a form. You'd fill in the form. You'd put your biometrics on the form in black ink. That was a very important document that needed to be stored somewhere.
Yeah.
And so we store it in big warehouses. One day when something gets lost and you need to reprint, somebody has to go and find that document.
Or a filing system that needs to be in place. It's a very intricate system. Wow.
So now we needed to digitize the system for the whole of the citizenry. Now remember, we have citizens, then we have non-citizens, and these are in turn broken down into people who have residency, people who are visiting us, and refugees. So these categories of people basically encompass everybody in the country, right?
Yeah.
Then we run our ports of entry. Our asylum centers, our ports of entry, our inspectorate. These are people who basically would go and raid McDonald's to make sure that all the workers there are actually legally in South Africa. We also had the ISC to assist. So as much as the ISC is an independent institution, when it needs legislation to be passed to change its act, or now with something to do with the elections, they'll come to Home Affairs, and Home Affairs the minister has to process their legislation through Parliament, because they don't have a minister of IEC.
Yeah.
At that stage, we also we ran the government printing works. I forgot about that. What else yes, we had the Films and Publications Board at the time that I was there. It's now with Communications. But these were the umbrella bodies that we had. So that was the vision, was to take Home Affairs from a paper-based organization to digitize it.
Massive project also.
It was a massive project. It could, it was very interesting because Dr. John Carnison mentioned to us, he was our chief strategic planning official. And what he did very often was he would go and do comparative studies with other countries in their departments of Home Affairs. And he said, at the time that we launched the Smart ID card, which is a fully digitized process for the first time in the history of South Africa, he said the British tried to do a similar thing around the same time that we were busy with our Smart ID card. They spent billions of pounds, and within the first 48 hours of them launching their ID card for their citizenry, their system was hacked. And that project just went down the drain.
Wow.
And we were, this is the benefit of having a leader like Minister Dlamini Zuma, who, as I said, spent that time with these people. We not only didn't spend as much as the British for our system, but we did it completely in-house. Oh. The only thing that we got from outside of the department was the card material, the polymer, the actual plastic.
Plastic and the print.
The physical card, in other words, to produce that physical card, the polymer and the smart chip.
Yeah.
We didn't manufacture in-house. We had to get it from outside. But from start to end of that manufacturing process, that is all internal.
That's an amazing feat. Just to do all of that, then we move on to Shine.
Yes. Shine
Tell us more. Tell us all about Shine.
It's a passion project, actually, because I left Parliament in 2019 at the last election that we had in 2019. I was tired of politics, and I decided I'd been there for 23 years as a member of Parliament at that time, and I decided I'm going to come and live a quiet life and be a good housewife. And then I got a call to say, look, we'd like you to apply for this position of the deputy chairperson. Priscilla Jana was the deputy chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, and she sadly passed away. And I thought to myself, I am getting bored. COVID had come over that same period, and so on. I was very bored. And so I thought, okay, how hard could it be? I got appointed. We obviously had to go through an interview process, all of those things, and then I got appointed, alhamdulillah, on the 1st of July, 2021. On the 7th of July, 2021, KwaZulu-Natal erupted in that unrest that we all, were so traumatized by. The looting, the burning of buildings, it was just a nightmare, actually. And the South African Human Rights Commission, of course, is implicated because there are human rights abuses happening left, right, and center. There's no police presence for at least 4 days in KZN. Police services had just completely gone. Yeah, they froze. And of course, this was a huge test for our young democracy, because it was really the first time that we'd seen unrest at this level. So the way the South African Human Rights Commission works is that we are a group of 8 commissioners with a chairperson, who at the time was Professor Bongani Majola, myself the deputy chairperson, and 6 other commissioners. Only 2 of us were newly appointed. The rest had been there for some time in 2021. So here I am, a newbie, and 7 days into, just being inducted into the organization,
into the deep end.
This thing happens. So I go out to KZN, I witness firsthand, speak to people who had been affected. We then have an imbizo where 300 people join us online to talk about what had happened and so on. And the question was, how do we respond as the South African Human Rights Commission? What do we do? And most of the commissioners there were saying, no, we need to launch an investigation. And I was very reluctant. I just thought, this kind of thing, the police should be investigating, the intelligence services should be investigating, not the Human Rights Commission. We have a different mandate, and clearly, while there are human rights abuses, the question in my mind wasn't who caused those abuses, what had happened, because everybody could see what had happened. The question in my mind that was looming very, very large for me is, how do we not get to this point again? It was very clear what had happened, and even our report that subsequently emerged only at the beginning of this year was that the situation on the ground was ready to be ignited, and anybody could have lit that spark and this thing would have ignited. We have, as South Africans, to understand what that situation was, because it could be this today, but it could be something else tomorrow. And the one thing that worried me the most when I went out there was there were squatter areas here, and they were built up homes across the road. And the people on the one side didn't know where their next meal was coming from. What was worrying them every day was, how am I going to feed my children tonight? The people across the road are worrying about other things. Am I going to pay my bond? Am I going to have a job tomorrow? Because it's COVID, right? So everybody's worried about something, but you're worrying at 2 different levels. Your pantry is full on this side. Here, it's a question of just hand-to-mouth existence. and the frustrations that had been pent up under those circumstances, they pertain everywhere in South Africa, actually.
It's a very common situation.
Absolutely. Poverty is very deep. And it is something we should be worried about very, very much as South Africans, that we have young people who are disaffected, so disaffected that they would think nothing of going to a mall and setting it ablaze. That tells you that they don't feel part of this community. They don't feel part of this country. So to them, the Bill of Rights means very little, because their rights don't exist where they are. They feel that they're not part of this system. And so for me, that was the most important thing. And so when we discussed what would be the response of the South African Human Rights Commission post the 21 unrest, the majority of commissioners felt, no, we have to go and investigate, which is what we did. I don't think the outcome of that investigation surprised anybody. My view was different, that we need a response that is different as the South African Human Rights Commission. And they asked, what is that response that you're talking about? And I, at that stage, didn't have an answer. And my response to the commissioners was, look, I don't know. As I sit here, I do not know. But I'm intent on finding out. And I think we need to consult the people of South Africa to find out what is it that we can do differently so that we avoid this situation again. And that's what we did. We spent the next 8 months going around the country speaking to all kinds of people, religious leaders, political leaders, academics, ordinary people, NGO people, people who were just, helping with homeless shelters, just an incredible array of people. And we took what they said and we tried to distill what they said, and we came up with this concept called SHINE. And SHINE is an acronym. It stands for the Social Harmony Through National Effort. So we say SHINE with a small I in the middle, because the I is very, very important. When we asked people around South Africa, what do we need? Everybody spoke about change. We need change. Change is very important. We all need to change. Our government needs to change. Why do we need to change? Well, we've got a lot of social ills. We've got poverty. We've got high levels of violence in our country. Domestic violence is at epidemic proportions. We are a country that is, many people are addicted to substances. These are habits that we have to change. Now, government can't come and change your addiction. Government can possibly have support groups and so on, but it's not going to change. You need to change you. People often blame government for domestic violence, high rate of domestic violence. The fact of the matter is, yes, the focus then shifts to the courts. Are the courts convicting people of domestic violence and so on? But actually, that's not how you eradicate domestic violence. You eradicate it from the home. People need to learn the kinds of things I was talking about. How do we dialogue through our differences? And so, again, it's not government that has to change. It's us as South Africans who need to change. And SHINE is about that. It's telling us how do we participate in this national effort to bring about the change that we all want to see. And it has 3 very simple steps. The first is self-reflection. It's very important to understand that we are all a work in progress. There's never been a perfect human being. right? We all have our faults. And so we are always in this process of redefining ourselves, being better, working at ourselves, the jihad that we talk about. So it's only through self-reflection that you can understand what needs to change about you.
Yeah.
So we worked with people like the Brahma Kumaris, who are very skilled at meditation, reflection, going deep into yourself to find out what is going on here. What is wrong? How do I? Yeah, exactly. And very often it's psychology. We even spoke to many psychologists, and they say to us, you can't change people. People have to change themselves.
Yeah. They must want it.
But even spending that time with yourself takes skill. There are many people who, I didn't even realize this, find it very hard to be alone with themselves, with their thoughts. And so we develop, in conjunction with some of these partners of ours, skills around self-reflection. And the more you self-reflect, the more whole you become, the more you heal, and the more you identify the things that you need to work at. The second step is positive dialogue, and we borrowed from our experience during COVID as a nation, when we all crowded around the television to have a family meeting with our president. So we encourage family meetings regularly in South African homes. And again, this is to try and dialogue through our problems. And how do we ask people to do so? We say, put away your cell phone, switch off your televisions, all of your distractions for half an hour once a month. Over a cup of tea or coffee, have everybody around the table, and let us start with affirming each other, because we don't know how to affirm our family members. And by the way, one of the things that we learned through these consultations, people were reflecting and saying to us, we leave the best of ourselves for strangers. When we meet a stranger, we're at our best behavior. You can't have a better behaved person. But for the people who are most important, the people who, if I have an accident tomorrow and I have to be carried to the bathroom, or are going to carry me to the bathroom, I reserve the worst of me. And this needs to change.
Yeah.
So family meetings are about expressing your love. So we start off by saying, the thing I like about you is you smile all the time and you make my day every time I see you. But the other day when you said this, that, and the other, it hurt my feelings. And it hurt my feelings because of this, that, and the other. Perhaps we can do better in future. Can you try not to say these things again? And everybody gets their turn to do an affirmation. The thing I like about you, and the thing I like about you, and the thing I like about you. But yesterday you left the toothpaste open, and it got hard, and it irritates me first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
Just so that we can talk through some of the, and release some of the pressure valves.
See, because that thing of, firstly, as bringing it back to family and community, I feel like that's an important thing where, as South Africans, that's where we can start building this country again.
Yeah.
I'll say for the next step. But also the thing, people, they don't express themselves. So when they build up all the tension, so when something does, like it's just a toothpaste, now they're shouting in the house, now they hitting the children, and you go, it's just toothpaste. This is not the cause.
But you see, this is why it's important, because when we were in KZN, my biggest concern were the young people. They were watching what was happening during the unrest, the burning, the looting, all of these things. What lessons are they drawing from this? And there doesn't seem to be available to them other tools to deal with disputes and anger and frustration. And so family meetings creates that other model of effectively handling disputes in the home. Then the third and last step of Shine is to learn about our diversity. It comes back again to our education system. We don't learn history as a compulsory subject, and we don't learn diversity as a compulsory subject. And what is diversity learning? Diversity education is about me knowing a different culture. When a child is born in that culture, what are the traditions, what are the practices? What is unique about that culture? And if my neighbor is somebody from that culture, when a child is born, what is expected of me? You understand? So I would have thought that coming from the apartheid era that forced us apart, that one of the first things we should have done as a country is to introduce diversity education in our classrooms so that our young people could learn this richness of diversity around us, but learn it intellectually and really understand it, because our constitution talks about respect and celebrating our diversity. We can't respect something we don't know, and we certainly can't celebrate it. But if we learn, we come to understand the wisdoms behind certain practices, etc., and then we celebrate it. So Shine is about that, creating platforms where we can learn about each other's diversity, where people from different religions can come and speak about their differences, where people from different cultures and backgrounds in South Africa can come and speak about, the richness of South Africa in its entirety. And so, yes, with these three steps, we hope to upgrade the software. A lot of my work for most of my career has been about drafting legislation, implementing legislation, and so on, but it's about creating a state, a democratic state, which is essentially the hardware. But we have a state-of-the-art democratic institution, but we haven't upgraded the software of our citizenry. And for me, that is the lack that Shine addresses in a very practical and very real way.
But also, alhamdulillah, you have started that the system of Shine that now it's in its infancy, but now it will go to South Africa, to South Africans, and go to the education system, to Home Affairs, and I'll say from life to death and after that you've done.
Inshallah.
Shukran for spending all this time with us. I've learned so much. You've taught us so much, and shukran for what you've done for this country also in setting up everything that we have now. We live in one of the best countries in the world as a constitution and as a Muslim and as a youth. There's so much potential, and while there's, I'll say, the dips that come with a new country, you've put in place for the next. You haven't just made you haven't made the country for the country. Now you've made the country for, I'll say, the future country as well. So shukran so much for your time. That's the end of our episode for today.
Well, shukran to you and your team and everybody at Muslims Connected. I'm very inspired by the work that you all do. I think it's amazing work, and I'm really so heartened that there are young people who are, pushing the boundaries of technology, use of technology, of getting people connected, because that's what it's all about.
We try on our own version of Shine at the moment.
Absolutely.
Shukran for joining us today. That's our episode. Please like and follow and subscribe. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Yaaseen Barnes, and this is the Muslims Connected podcast.